we've been embarking on over the last few years for us are just as important today as they were in the past. And we will be pursuing the same policies. And I can only hope that those who are opposed to us will wake up to the reality that, look, I mean, we have good intentions for this country, and they've always been welcome, and they will always be welcome to join in the development of the nation.
So that's the man, the ex-president of the country, Jerry John Rawlings, after he cast his vote in 1996. Earlier, you saw him during the 1996 rally as well. Yesterday, we woke up to the sad news of his demise. We're told he died at 10:10 in the morning at the Kolebu Teaching Hospital. Today, we'll have our discussions around this man who didn't only rule the country or seen as the president who served the country, longest serving president, but also founded the biggest opposition party that had won quite a number of elections as well. To do this discussion, I have two gentlemen. Selim Adonu is head of features and articles here at City FM and City TV, as well as Kojo Akoto-Boateng. He heads our new media team here at City FM and City TV. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vivian.
Okay. How did you guys hear of Rawlings' passing yesterday? Where were you? Where were you in court?
No, I just come out of court and I got a message asking me if I'd heard of the demise of the former president. I was a bit shocked because I hadn't heard of any sickness, so I didn't quite reply. And I asked a friend to ask a friend. Incidentally, I had a friend. He had a brother who worked in the office of the former president, so he called him. He wasn't picking. And he called him again, and he just when he was about talking to him, he told him somebody, a bigger person, was calling him, so he would call him. He would call him. But that was when I sensed something could be amiss, and indeed, and City by that time had confirmed it. So I said, "Wow, once it's been confirmed, then that's so unfortunate." So it's really the end of an era. Rawlings. Yesterday, I was saying on what the papers are saying that I did not believe that I was sitting there talking about the demise of Rawlings, somebody we had seen or we had looked up to, or somebody who wowed us by his looks, by his charisma, by his very nature, you know, when we were very young and then even in our growing up. And he shaped our political, you know, should I say awareness, because a lot of us became politically aware whilst he was still president. So for a lot of us, he was all we knew till 2001 when John Kufuor took over. So it's really the end of an era, given the nature of the man, the angry Rawlings in the 79, 82 days of the revolution. Now, so that was a youthful Rawlings, now maturing into the middle-aged man, the democratic man, transitioning into democracy, doing 8 years as, you know, a constitutionally elected president, and then his life post the presidency, where he became what you can describe as an adult, or I mean an old man, and tried to speak his mind on things he felt were important in the country. Some of those did not go well with some people, but in the end, he managed to assume a certain toned down personality in terms of his criticism of various issues. But of course, that statement is particularly loaded because people have thought many things around it. So Rawlings, this death, I mean, very shocking and very painful. Though I was thinking about yesterday, he was 73, and 73 looks like quite a good age.
Yeah,
but
bad.
Perhaps it's like we've never had, or we didn't have enough, or we wanted to see him around, thinking that he will never grow older, he will never die. But as they say of Nkrumah never dies. Let's see if Rawlings really died, or Rawlings too never dies.
Okay, we'll see. How about you?
Yeah, I was in the middle of a webinar when an old colleague of ours, his call was coming through, so I cut the call. and then some other person also called me. I cut the call, and then our conversations on the platform where you said, well, we are hearing something, but we have to hold on to get the right confirmations. And then other people started texting, and then we went on air to break the news. You broke the news. So that's how the whole thing was. So as the news was developing, I was driving back to the office because if the former president, if a country loses a former president, everything must stop for work around that story to develop. So I had to stop whatever I was doing to head back to the office. So that's really how I got to hear the story. Okay,
so today our discussions will be around this man who, whether you like it or not, played, a significant role in our democracy today. Also, the era we find ourselves in, the Fourth Republic, among others. We'll fast forward to 1992 because of the democracy, and then us being in the Fourth Republic. You're free to quickly touch on his military days or military rule, but I think we'll fast forward to 1992 and look at how he ushered himself into the democracy discussion.
Well, so I mean, the democracy discussion can really not be started without briefly speaking about the last days of the revolution, where the discussion about returning Ghana to multi-party democracy, I mean, began to gain currency. And, it began to gain currency mainly because of pressure from the external environment, international bodies, international forces, international allies, if you like. I mean, that discussion began to heat up, and it was really the time for such a discussion across the sub-region. So that was one. And number two, there was increasing intelligence reports suggested that there was increasing quest for multi-party democracy. Groups have started forming in various places, calling themselves clubs, etc., just to think about the future of Ghana and what place what place certain persons will play in that future. So the PNDC eventually agreed to return Ghana to democratic rule, and the PNDC agreeing, I mean, largely means that Rawlings agreeing to return Ghana to democratic rule or multi-party constitutional rule. So in 1990, the PNDC formed what we call the National Commission on Democracy, the NCD, which was chaired by retired jurist D.F. Annan, who later became the Speaker of Parliament. So what the National Commission on Democracy did was to organize regional fora, and they even drilled down to the district level to inform people and also to collate views on the impending return to multi-party democracy and how that particular experience would be and what it should be. So the NCD submitted a report which favored the return to multi-party democracy, and soon after that, what we call the Committee of Experts, which was a 9-member committee chaired by Dr. Nana SKB Asante and with a few other influential people like Justice Jage, Professor Evio Dankwa, Dr. Farijan, and a few other influential names were part of that. So that body was formed to look at the framework of the Constitution. They tried to put
It's your most engaging news bulletin on TV.
It's a very oh, that's too bad. The youth are still throwing stones. They are still throwing stones here into our direction. And can I come in? I want to come in. Okay.
Telling your stories better with correspondents covering every corner of the country.
Getting access to potable water is a daily struggle for residents of Kakichekopi and Balekopi communities in the Ada East district of the Greater Accra region.
City Newsroom at 8 p.m. Very fluent with issues that concern you.
This is quite me cover on Mr. Rabbi. Someone is here, bread. Told you kind of a 1 week. What do you say?
Is it unfair? What all this? What all this? We are dying! We are dying! We are dying for talk!
With City Newsroom, your community is now connected.
In this our community, all of us, we are very sorry about this school. If we went to see the children, they are so small. Even my grandchildren are there. My grandsons are there. if they come out from the school, I have this.
Every day at 8 p.m., City Newsroom is live on City TV.
This weekend on Footprints, Roman Catholic priest Reverend Father Andrew Campbell talks about his childhood, life in the seminary, and his relocation to Ghana for his missionary work.
Many times I'd go to school with holes in my shoes. I didn't have enough money. My parents didn't have enough money to buy me new shoes. And
But you were in Dublin?
And I stick cardboard into the shoes. I'd have patches in my trousers going to school.
Really?
Things were, but we were a happy family. That was the most important thing. We were a happy, loving, caring family.
Was it the same class or different?
The class, no, the same class. We started off, you know, in the major seminary. We started off at 31. But by the time we came to the ordination, there were only 15 of us.
Where were the rest?
Some had died, and
Oh.
others had left. Others felt the vocation to the married life, so they left. Yeah, but one or two of them died.
Some died along the
Yeah.
line.
One had cancer of the lung.
Oh no!
You know, there was a few of them that it was sad.
Yeah.
So the rest.
And some had a change of.
Some had
mission.
changed. They felt that God was calling them to be to the married life.
Okay.
So the 15 of us were ordained, and at this moment.
So what? They saw women around and they decided that they won't do it again.
Well, I don't know.
Going back to, you know, bury your sister, didn't you get any prompting not to come back?
Yes, I did.
Tell me about that.
I did. I stayed about 2 or 3 weeks, and I came back, and I said, no, I'm not going to stay. But I said, I got posted to St. Peter's in Osu, and at this stage, I didn't want to stay in Ghana. But I started working in Osu with the people in Osu, and they were wonderful. They won my heart. They won my heart. I thank St. Peter's Osu for what he did for me. And I said, no, this is where I want to stay. And I changed my mind, and I was so happy in St. Peter's Osu, so happy. Doing my first baptism, you know, doing, you know, saying Mass and visiting the people and the sick, and bringing the kids out in my car and others.
Footprints airs this and every Saturday at 9 a.m. with a repeat on Sunday at 4 p.m. only on City TV.
Footprints is sponsored by Bethel Logistics Company Limited, experts in shipping logistics.
It is the Election Bureau. It is the Voters' Diary. Thank you for staying with us. Our conversations around Jerry John Rawlings, his impact on our elections and our democracy and governance continues. Salom was making a point about how he ushered himself into the 1992 Constitution. Salom.
Yes. So we're talking about the National Commission on Democracy, chaired by Justice D.F. Annan, who later became the Speaker of Parliament, and the work that commission did by going around the country holding regional fora, etc., to test the mood of the country and to make them aware that this was what was going to happen. And you must also know that D.F. Annan was one of the proponents of this, and he, together with Kudu Chikata, who picked up a lot of intelligence, knew that was a clamor internationally and even locally. Things have started happening. People have started meeting at the Buzia Dankwa Club, etc. So the ground was being prepared for that. So it was quite apt, and the timing was right for that, consultation to occur. So after a while, after the work of the National Commission on Democracy was concluded, a report was issued, and the NCD advocated a multi-party constitutional rule. The report was accepted by the PNDC, by extension Rawlings, and by then his mind has been worked on to accept what was to come. And so a 9-member committee of experts who actually did a draft of the constitution was formed, and that 9-member commission of experts was chaired by Nana Dr. SKB Asante, who is still around today, very resourceful person. There were people like Justice Jiage, Evio Dankwa, and Dr. Farijan, who later became the chairman of the Electoral Commission, all on that 9-member committee. So the committee did a good job by putting a draft constitution together, and so that draft constitution had to be put through what we call the consultative assembly. So the consultative assembly looked at it, considered it, and approved of it, and now that constitution had to be approved by the country, and so it had to come through a referendum. So the 1992 referendum was held, and overwhelmingly the country voted a yes, which meant that we wanted or we favored a multi-party constitutional rule. So now Rawlings, a military person, there was a talk about what to do with the PNDC, the leadership, that government, the alliances formed, the experience garnered, what should happen to those people and everything they had. So the discussion has happened in the corridors of power, according to Ato Ahoy. There were 3 schools of thought. One was that let's build a house. Number 2, let's rent a house. Number 3, let's abandon a house. You know, the house in this case meant a political party. So should the PNDC just dissolve and move away, and everybody who should go his way, find where they belong? That would be abandoning the house. That is just demolishing the government as it is and let everybody go find where they came from. You should also know that, you know, at that time, people came from various places. DF Annan and Mahama Idrisu and co were people of the UP stock. Kojo Chikata and Eboteria and co were people of the CPP stock. The military guys were led by Rawlings, etc. So there were people from various places who came together. So if you say, let's abandon your house, let everybody go find where they belong, the people will certainly find their places. The other part was to rent a house, whether to maybe go take over a political party, perhaps like the CPP. So get into a party and then own it. The other school of thought was to form a political party. In the end, the discussions favored forming a political party. So the NDC then was formed. And so there was a few other parties formed, the Eagle Party and the NCP, etc. So they came together in what we call the Progressive Alliance and chose Rawlings to lead them as their flag bearer. So Rawlings, a military person in military uniform, became the flag bearer of the NDC, and I was going around the country, you know, campaigning. So that was towards the election 1992. And an interesting thing happened. Rawlings' nationality was challenged by one Dr. John Bilson, who stood for president in 1979 also. And his point was that Rawlings had UK citizenship by virtue of his father being a Scottish. But the matter did not find favor with the court. The court was of the view that Rawlings, prior to even that time, had served in the Ghana Armed Forces. Number 2, he had become head of state twice, 1979 and 1982, through to that time. So indeed, there was no proof that he did not, and indeed, he had sworn the oath of allegiance to the country, and there was no proof that he was going to do anything to destabilize the country. So that was taken out of the way. And after that, Rawlings assumed more energy, campaign, and a few days to filing, he resigned as a military person, and then now properly got on the ground as a civilian and campaigned and won that election quite, you know, handsomely. And he won by some 58%. The MPP won with some 30.4%.
Okay. Could you run us through the numbers of that election? Remember also that election, we saw the MPs from the other side boycotting the elections as well. So could you, if you can...
I just wanted to add something to the history that Salom gave us. If you look at those of us born in the 80s who had not experienced the events before the 80s, you'd realize that the 1992 Constitution that we still use is the biggest and the most precious gift that our forebears have given to us, which Rawlings and his team led in formulating. Is the Constitution that has gotten the Ghana that respect globally and that reverence as a country which is peaceful and hospitable. So one, they say we are hospitable. Two, they say it's a peaceful and it's a beacon of democracy. And I think it's what has allowed a lot of us to thrive and grow and explore the opportunities within the system. There are inadequacies in the Constitution. There are certain things which are not too clear. There are certain things which we need to get right. But at least it laid a good foundation for people like us to live in a country at peace. We are not there when it comes to the development, but at least you can go to bed and wake up in the morning knowing that if you are even earning below the minimum wage, you can sleep and not think that somebody is coming to shoot you or somebody is coming to take you into a prison, or that you are going to lose your parents without trial and everything. So I think that it's important to mention that the 92 Constitution has been a big gift and a big contribution to our lives. And I'm speaking for 80s bonds and to this particular republic, which is the Fourth Republic of Ghana.
Okay.
Now, let's look at the elections from 92. So, 92, we organized the first elections after we got the Constitution, and Rawlings won. Out of the regions in the country, it was only Ashanti region that he didn't win.
Okay.
He won all the other regions. And so, from Greater Accra, Central, all the regions, he won the regions with a good number too. The vote count, he got 59.14%. The NPP got 29.4%. So you see the gap. It was quite a big gap. And the other parties came with the rest of the votes. That was in 1992. So it was a convincing win. And then in 1996, he ran again for a second constitutional term. He won all the regions again, except the Ashanti region. He won quite convincingly. You know, when we started the voters' diary and we went into the history of the elections, there were some questions asked. Why did Rawlings win that big? Were people afraid that if he lost, he would throw away the Constitution and do his own thing? Or the other parties were not strong enough? But he had the opportunities as an incumbent. He had the state machinery to also support him. Back then too, we didn't have the media as it is today. So he had an upper hand over his opponents. And then in the year 2000, he lost to former President Kufuor.
His party.
Pardon?
His party.
Well,
then it was Atamils.
It was Atamils, but
leading the party.
I'm using he lost advisedly because Atamils was his personal pick, right? Who had his full backing. So if Atamils lost, invariably you could say that Rawlings lost because he handpicked him and pushed for him to win the president. So in the year 2000, the party he founded and the candidates supported, which is the late Professor Evans Atamils, lost to former President Kufuor.
Okay, but 1992, I mean, he won resoundingly, but he was faced with a stolen verdict matter, a boycott of parliamentary elections and all that. But despite that, we saw him, sail through nicely. Salam.
Yes, the stolen verdict, quite a controversial thing, because even way after 1992, Jerry Rawlings remained very, very popular. Of course, the jury is still out if the jury is still out if he contested the 2000 election, whether he would have won. So in 1992, Rawlings was hugely popular, and any election, given the circumstances of the time, Rawlings would have won hands down. So the whole talk about the stolen verdict, I mean, comes as a very interesting one, because the next election, 96, he won. The 2000 election, he didn't contest. His party contested. His pick, like Ojo said, Atamils contested. He lost, but he didn't lose until after a runoff. So that was how tough it was. So to assume that the MPP won the 1992 election, as the stolen verdict tried to suggest, I think was quite funny. There were a number of things in that era. So that was the stolen verdict. They said the election was rigged. There was widespread irregularities across 100 of the 200 constituencies, etc. I don't know if those irregularities, if when corrected, would be enough to overturn the votes. I don't know. But the point really was that there were irregularities across about 100 of the constituencies. Now, we must know that the presidential election was conducted about a month before the parliamentary election.
Yeah.
So because of the so-called irregularities that the opposition parties, led by the NPP, alleged in the 1992 presidential election, they made a number of demands, or they put some conditions on the table that if those conditions were not met, they were not going to take part in the election. And that was interesting, because if you took part in the election, I mean, it's for your own good. Maybe because of the international attention Ghana was receiving, so perhaps that boycott took something away from you. But what were the matters on the table? One, that they wanted an interim government to supervise the rest of the transition from a military regime into the constitutional rule. An interim government. So the PNDC, Rawlings and co., who were government people, should form or should step down, and an interim government supervising the process. I think that was a big ask. Number two, they wanted a new electoral register. So the NPP calling for a new register was not a thing of today. It started since 1992. So they wanted a new electoral register for the parliamentary election. How that was going to be done in 1 month, because there was just about 1 month between the presidential and parliamentary. How that was going to be done in the 1 month, I didn't know. So after the discussions got to a stalemate, nobody was ready to compromise. The traditional leaders and the religious leaders, which is a unique thing Ghana or Africa has, tried to intervene, but they did not succeed. The NPP eventually announced, and the smaller parties announced, their withdrawal from the parliamentary elections. But the NDC won. The NDC won even in the presidential. The NDC won in 152 constituencies. NPP won in 43 constituencies, and then the PNC won in about 3 constituencies. So in Central Region, the NDC swept the whole of the region, 17 constituencies, won all. Volta region won all the 19 constituencies. But after the end, in Northern Region, apart from Yendi, it won all the other constituencies. So that was an election of a person who was very popular. So after the boycott of the parliamentary elections, NDC won 189 seats, NCP won 8, Eagle won 1, and then there were 2 independent candidates. So the influence of Rawlings and the popularity of Rawlings in that 1992 era, I think was comparable to nothing we had seen, or nothing we've seen in the 4th Republican era. Of course, that popularity waned as time went on. Yeah. But in 1992, Rawlings was hugely popular, and he was enough on his own merits to just win an election. That was the kind of person we were dealing with. So that was the context of the boycott, and the context of how Rawlings himself won that election with Konkesiaka, who was his running mate from the NCP Progressive Alliance, thing.
Okay.
And let me also add that Rawlings is almost like the only person in the 4th Republican era to have won elections with a South ticket. All along, before you win an election, or from then, before you win an election, you must ensure you balance the ticket with the North-South. Yeah. Rawlings was a Southerner. Both his running mates, Aka and Atamils later, were Southerners, but he won those elections big time, which also speaks to his popularity across the length and breadth of the country.
Okay, 96, was the story better for him in terms of challenging of results from the opposition parties at the time?
Well, so 96 was an interesting election. 96 was a proper election because things had happened. So a lot of things happened between 92 and 96. The Electoral Commission proper was formed in between the 92 election and 96 election, before it was the Independent Electoral Commission also. So we had a proper Electoral Commission between that period. We also had the IPAC, the Inter-Party Advisory Committee, as we have it today. We had it formed in those times. So the IPAC played a huge role in reaching compromises on things. So a lot of things happened which made the 1996 election very successful. So one, there was the ballot box. Before, it was an opaque metal ballot box, aluminum ballot box of a kind. So there was a talk that you could not see what was inside. So transparent ballot boxes were introduced, and that was discussed and agreed upon at the IPAC meeting. A number of things happened which that made the election quite credible, and so the media was growing, the newspaper front was growing, private media was beginning to rear its head, and a lot of things began to happen. The country was actually opening up because we had almost done 4 years of democratic.
So that was the year that we introduced, or we started holding the elections, both parliamentary.
So that was part of the thing that IPAC agreed on, that the two elections, parliamentary and presidential, should be held on the same day, and a few other things which have become key to our elections.
We introduced the photo ID cards.
Exactly.
We also introduced the party agents and all that, and then of course, like you said, the compilation of the new register, among others.
So that made the 1996 election a great election. So John Kufuor contested that election, and he was coming up against the hugely popular J.J. Rawlings. So J.J. Rawlings went into that election again as a favorite. John Kufuor came up with this campaign message about like, look at your circumstance and vote. So I remember after the election, an interview granted GBC or so, the interviewer asked him whether he felt that by losing it meant the people's sitting was better.
That's okay.
So he gave an answer that, well, that is what they felt, but he thought that if, given more information and time, the thinking would change. So that was it. He won that election by a 57.4 percentage points, and MPP came in second with 39.6. At that time, MPP had started growing popular as well. So that was the first time they had gotten into parliament. A number of things happened when they got to parliament. But Rawlings remained that huge force. And to his credit, he tried to bend over a bit to allow one or two concessions, etc. And so much credit also goes to people like D.F. Annan, who were able to moderate that process and make things work. So that was the story of the 1996 election. And indeed, that was the first time I think I saw Rawlings, because we had gone to visit somebody on a story building around the Niboyman New Market also area. So they were holding this huge rally at a park near the story building we were on. So we were on top of the story building and watching the rally. And that was when I saw J.J. Rawlings for the first time. And this gentleman from who was MP for Alaju, the Alaju area, the Alaju area, also Central, Sinari. And he looked very much like Rawlings. So when I saw him from a distance, I thought I was Rawlings. So I was excited. And I said Rawlings had come. They said, no, that wasn't Rawlings. That was somebody else. And Rawlings, so it was a nice thing. So what's the name? Obeda Samuel Nku were at that rally. It was such a nice time to experience politics. For the first time, first hand. And so much credit to Rawlings for making this happen. If he hadn't agreed to the multi-party constitutional rule, we wouldn't have been here. And we don't have to take that for granted, because a lot of his contemporaries across the world refused to agree, or they took a very watered down version of constitutional rule or democracy, as we even see in countries like Cote d'Ivoire, Uganda, Togo, etc. So he has so much to his credit in that regard.
1996.
Yeah, 1996, that was when I had developed my senses. At least I was still young, but I knew what NDC was. I knew what PNCA Yokube was, and I knew all those things. Growing up in Ejazongo, the campaigns, sometimes they'll put the black and white TV on the porch, and then we'll be watching TV to see the president speak, right, and the campaign. So that was when I really got to know the man Rawlings, and also got to know the man Kufuor, who wanted to unseat Rawlings. That was also when I got to see a lot about the former First Lady, because she was also almost always on TV in the evenings. Yeah. So I remember the 96 election vaguely from Ejazongo, because it was quite a political place. Now you move from Ejazongo, you get to Eja proper and Imbronum. So from an NDC stronghold to an MPP stronghold, you'd see the rallies, you hear the noise. There was the parties also for the campaigning. And so 96 ushered me into knowing the man properly as my president, and also knowing the opposition leader, who was Kufuor. But I think one very important thing was that by 96, a lot more people were also aware. So if you look at the voter turnout between 92 and 96, because by 96, the other parties didn't boycott, so we had a bigger voter turnout, number one. And number two, his share of the voting also dropped. So things were swaying a bit. And that momentum was what Kufuor built on in the year 2000 when this song, I think, has been the best political song to change fortunes. Eradicasa. When Eradicasa was dropped, because by the year 2000, we were in junior high school, almost about entering senior high school. I remember I entered senior high school in 2001, so I was very aware of what was happening. So the most important thing for me back then was that we faced Y2K in the year 2000. We said there was a rock somewhere coming to hit the world, and the world was going to stop working. All computers were going to stop working, and then elections were coming. And I remember the day my mom took us to the market. I carried half a sack of gari. My brother carried a lot of other things. Why?
In preparation for a likely.
Yes, because Rawlings was going into the elections. It was possible Kufuor would win, and people didn't know what was going to happen, whether he will hand over power or not. I remember the gari I carried because I had a big head and a small neck, and I could feel the weight of the gari. Yes,
but the head is still there.
No, you see, now the head is there, the neck has also grown, and there's a shoulder to support. But back then there was no shoulder and a neck to support the head and the gari, so the head alone was weight on the neck, plus the half. This is a serious one.
Your mom is watching, you're like,
on election day, I think the day before elections, and we didn't have pipe-borne water in our house. We had a barrel. So we had to fill the barrel, and she bought an extra barrel for water. And that was about the time we didn't have enough pure water, so there was a paying. You know the water that is poured into the plastic and then so the manually done one. There was a paying. We bought a lot of that and put in buckets and pans and pushed under the bed. And the election day, we were locked up in the house all day. She didn't even go out to vote.
Playing.
No, because she was a single mother. She didn't know whether there was going to be violence, and where we lived, it just don't go. There were clashes every now and again.
It was a hot spot.
It was a hot spot. So we practically were indoors till about 3 days' time when the results had come in and everything looked as though Rawlings would hand over power and there was no violence before we were able to come out. And for me, the fact that he handed over power when a lot of people didn't expect him to, when around the time other African leaders were not doing same, was quite important for me because, like I said, from the 92 Constitution and that handing over, that has set us on a course where we've become a beacon of democracy, and that the African youth, the Ghanaian youth, can go to bed and wake up knowing that even though we would say our politicians are corrupt, even though we say development is not as it must be, we know that nobody is picking the gun right now to come and take over our streets, for them to impose curfews for us to sleep at 6 p.m. and wake up at 6 a.m. So that's my experience with the man Rawlings and the events around that time.
And I think this 2000 thing, the handing over of power after his party lost, is something that a lot of people credit him with. In fact, if you look at Duncan Williams' statement he released today on his fond memories of ex-President Rawlings, he said that, let me read what he said at the point. When Ghana was at the crossroads in 2000, when I was living in the U.S. at the time, many people called me with concerns about the uncertainty of the future political spectrum of our beloved nation, Ghana. In a conversation with Jerry about these concerns, he expressed his conviction that he had done his best and had to now move on to make way for others to come in and continue the task of nation building. This spoke volumes to me about the selfless character of the man. Can you imagine what the story of Ghana would be if he had selfishly held on to power? I will remember him for putting Ghana first. So I think that year 2000 thing really played, you know, a lot of role in how in the end we came to see him as somebody who...
Because two things could have happened. If I had decided that, look, I won't hand over power, I'm still going to stay on, then there will be an uprising. I'm sure there will be civilians like the opposition party that would rise and hit the streets. And then soldiers, because around that time, soldiers were still key and present in our everyday lives, then soldiers will also hit the streets. Soldiers who are for him would prevent civilians from demonstrating. Soldiers against him will also say, no, you've had 20 years, it's enough, go. And then Ghana will be thrown into a state of chaos. So for me, that is very, very important to mention, that he stepped down. There was a peaceful transfer of power. And after the peaceful transfer of power, there were lots of moments of booms where he would take on the former President Kufuor, criticize him harshly for things he was doing, whether right or wrong. And those also became key elements in our media landscape, because back then the media was growing, private media ownership was also growing, and these speeches would get mainstream attention. And if you go 2-3 weeks without a Rawlings speech or a boom, people will be asking, is everything all right? So all those things have shaped, and I think those things also made people realize that, look, we're in a new era, and people could also speak their minds. If you could speak his mind, I could also speak my mind. If there is a democratically elected government and there was rule of law, then I could also freely invest in the country and invest in my dreams to get me to where I want to get to.
Okay, let me take you to the famous Acha the Mochiman speech on the campaign trail in 2011 at the time. And then when we're done with that, we'll look at some other famous speeches he made after he had finished running as president and was now in the, still in the political realm, but more around his party and other matters.
They noticed that she had just been dumped into the box, not powdered up, not done up, and things like that. That's when they decided to do something about it themselves, polished her up, had it done up before she was sent back to the States. That's when you begin to realize some of the difficulties in some of these professions. I'm saying this because I guess in a situation like this, if you do not, like in those days, tip the mortuary attendant, you will not get your face powdered, you will not get your hair combed properly so that you look dignified in the box. Anyway, one day I met this friend of mine, Atta, at 37, and I think I must have come back into office the second time, but I knew him long before, and he was looking very sinew, but very dry. His eyes were always red, always smoking and smelling of alcohol. One day, after I had come back into office, I went to 37 and met Atta, the mortuary attendant. Believe it or not, Atta had completely transformed. Atta was looking so good. There was meat on his skin. And I asked, and his eyes were no longer red. And I asked Atta, what's gone wrong? What are you doing? And he said he had quit drinking and he had quit smoking. At that time, I was a pretty heavy smoker too. But I must tell you that somehow I was able to gain some strength out of this mortuary attendant, that if he can stop smoking, and I was doing about 3 packets a day, I could also stop smoking. And as I presented my gift to him, do you know what Atta said? My master, someday when you die, you can be sure that I will powder your face very nice for you. I mean, I guess most people would be shocked, but I had to understand him. That was the only way he could also demonstrate his affection and a way of saying thank you to me. Ladies and gentlemen, last night, a few of my colleagues went round to visit some of the delegates and came back at 3 o'clock in the morning this morning, to speak of the deplorable conditions they found some of them in, the unhygienic situations, some of them, as I said, struggling to sleep on the table, delegates who are here without whom we are nobody. Ladies and gentlemen, I find it very ironical that some of us here are actually in charge of logistics supplies like mattresses and things like that. And we could have used this opportunity to supply mattresses or full mattresses to some of our delegates as part of the logistic provision. But no, this wasn't done. And yet, when of our senior colleagues die or their in-laws die, lorry loads of mattresses, supplies of rice and whatnot are dispatched to go and take care of those funerals. And when it's even done, so much is left to be transported somewhere. Ladies and gentlemen, there is something.
So ex-President Rawlings over there in 2011 in Tamale. Guys, so after he exited the presidential, spot and was now more into his party, there were a lot of issues at the time. Today, there's a boom speech tomorrow. And he was somebody who would speak, whether it's his party or another party.
Yes, I mean, you needed to grant him that. I mean, like the things he said at Tademochuban, you could see at some point the stories were not coherent. I mean, you didn't know what he was saying. He would say it, but he knew exactly what he wanted to put across. He would talk that way and leave and open, and now leave it open for people to put their interpretation to it. Media would discuss, so that was the kind of person he was. People thought or both think he liked attention, but he never failed to call out, things he felt had to be dealt with in a particular manner. So, for example, he was talking about how delegates were handled. They left them to sleep anywhere while they could have supplied them with mattresses, etc. These were the things that mattered to him. And just on the lighter side, when we're growing, ladies, the phrase "ladies and gentlemen," I mean, he was the guy who actually popularized that. So I remember one time I was in church, he stood, was preaching, and he said, "Ladies and gentlemen." I thought he had said something unusual in church because I felt it was a political phrase. Yeah.
And countrymen and women.
Only to realize later that "ladies and gentlemen" is actually a normal.
Ladies and gentlemen.
So that was Rawlings. I mean, it's a pity that we won't have him around again. But indeed, his legacy will live on, and posterity will really be the best judge of what he has contributed. But there is no doubt in our minds what impact he has made on our lives and on the life of Ghana and our democracy.
Okay.
Well,
do you have 20 seconds?
Yes, for me, he was very close with his wife. At least that's what we know, and that's what I saw growing up. And I think that with his demise, there's going to be a lot of pressure on Nana Akufo-Addo Rawlings and the family. He was a leader of the country, so there's going to be a lot of eyes on the family. But I suggest that Ghanaians, as much as possible, as we mourn him, also allow the family to grieve, because they have lost the biggest thing in their lives. So we must, as much as possible, allow them to grieve. There'll be all sorts of things said, all sorts of things done, but whatever you do, you should know that there's somebody in pain, somebody mourning their father or their husband who would need some space to grieve properly without all the extra pressure and all the extra unsettling. When people die, all sorts of things happen. Yeah. And I think that we should give his family that respect and the space to mourn in peace. Okay.
I'm not sure we've been able to exhaust the man, Jerry John Rawlings, in today's edition. Yeah. So maybe Monday we may go around it and really exhaust as much as we can. But thank you so much for joining us. Salam Adonu was here with me, as well as Kojo Akoto-Boate. My name is Vivian Kai. Look, we return on Monday at 3 o'clock. But the repeat of the show is at 10 p.m. tonight. Goodbye.